Okay, so welcome back to another edition of the Nerdcast. My name is Dan Schessel, and on today's edition of the Nerdcast, we are talking with Ryan Mitchell. But first off, we're gonna. Sorry, I lost my spot. So the Nerdcast is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, powered by ATV. Please feel free to head on over to Alberta Podcast Network for a list of amazing Alberta-made podcasts. We would also like to encourage everyone out there that if you enjoy this episode, to share it with your friends on social media. This way, we are able to help grow the community here in Edmonton and keep everyone up to date on the latest news and information regarding the geeky and nerdy people groups and events. Also, if you or someone you know would like to be featured on our show, please feel free to contact us over at northernnerdnetwork.com. Now, let's get on with the show. All right, so like I said earlier, we are here today. We have Ryan Mitchell joining us on the Nerdcast. Say hello.
Hey, is my mic working?
Yes.
Oh, it is? Perfect. Yeah, so I'm not Ryan, actually. I'm Ian Banky. Ryan's my partner. Yeah, he was setting it up. He's who you were talking to on email.
Man. That's awful.
Yeah, no worries.
See, this happens too many times. I'm going to do this intro again because...
Yeah, no, it's all good, man. Actually, but now that we're on the topic of Ryan, he's actually in the YouTube comments. He's over here as well, so... If you want to ask the publisher any questions or anything, feel free to in the YouTube comments there.
Awesome. Okay, so there we go. So Ian then, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, we're so glad to have you on the show tonight. And we're going to talk a little bit about stray books and some of the stuff that you're working on. But first off, we'd like to get to the soul of every person that we have on our show by asking them what you have on your geek shelf. So Ian, what do you have on your geek shelf?
Yeah, currently my geek shelf is really a bookshelf. I have lots and lots of books, but I am currently reading Isaac Asimov's Robots of Dawn, which is the third book in his robot trilogy, and it's pretty great.
Tell me a little bit about this robot trilogy, about this series.
Yeah, so Isaac Asimov, he was a really prolific science fiction writer that kind of started off in the 1940s and 50s. And on top of having a whole bunch of degrees, he managed to have a very robust writing career. And he has a few main series, with the robot series being one of the main ones. But over the course of 30 years, he kind of ties all of his books together. So he wrote a lot of the base books in the 1950s and then did sort of follow-ups or continuations of the series in the 80s. And the one I'm currently reading is one of the books from the 80s. But what he's doing with those ones, including Robots of Dawn, is kind of tying all of his writing over decades together and telling an entire fictional future that covers like 2,000 years or more. It's insane. It's one of the craziest. Yeah, it's really interesting. So it's Robots of Dawn, unsurprisingly, deals with robots, but it's at a point of very, very early space colonization. And he kind of, throughout the trilogy, goes to 3 different planets. And the first planet is Earth, and they hate robots. There's a lot of prejudice against them. They don't want them around at all. And in the second book, he goes to a planet where there's millions and millions and millions of robots and only a few thousand people. And the people are just kind of infantile and always taken care of by robots. And the last book, Robots of Dawn, they go to a planet called Aurora, and there's a healthier balance between the two. And it's a more idealistic sort of country or government.
Awesome. Yeah. So what got you into this series in the first place? Like, did you start all the way back throughout the whole series, or you just kind of looked up the main 3 there?
I kind of got into Asimov's writing with the Foundation series, which is a bit different than the robot ones. But I got into it while I was writing Future Fables and Strange Stories, because I go to used bookstores a lot, and I really like old sci-fi pulp a bunch. And I was just devouring it for a period of time. And I had a copy of Foundation that my dad gave me. It's this like beautiful 1970s edition with this really minimalist art on it. and I was just in this 50s sci-fi kick, and I picked it up and started reading it, and it was about 2 years ago. And since then, yeah, I've been reading a lot of Isaac Asimov pretty continually for the last like 2 years. I read a lot of other stuff as well, but I just like can't get enough. And then once I clued into the fact that he was writing this fictional future, it was just so mind-blowing. And it's just yeah, anyone who hasn't checked out Isaac Asimov, really recommend him. He's easy to read, and his concepts are just huge and amazing. And yeah, it's good stuff.
That's awesome. So, because we don't really, I usually have a co-host on the show. So I'm going to ask you a little bit. How's your week been?
Yeah, it's been a super busy week. So me and my team here at Straight Books, we went to When Words Collide, which is a sort of writers and publishers conference in Calgary for 3 days. And it was a very busy weekend, met lots of people, saw lots of great presentations. And then this week, we have a magazine coming out in September. So everyone's kind of full hands on deck right now trying to get that done. So it's been a lot of editing and writing and doing a lot of artwork, and yeah, it's been some long days, but it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. For myself, anyways, we went to Animathon on the weekend. And if for everyone out there who is watching the show, I'm going to have that episode out for you guys a little bit later on this week. I'm just kind of putting it all together. We went around and we talked to a lot of the various artists and vendors, and not only that, we talked to some of the we talked to Brian Flowers from Tabletop Cafe, because he was taking care of the whole board game area down there, and so we talked to him about that. And the other thing about Animathon this year is that it's in a bigger venue. So usually it's at MacEwan University. And it's kind of just spread out everywhere. And this year they moved it over to the Shaw Conference Center, which is a totally different setting than they had for the previous amount of years. This is the 25th year for doing Animathon. And so it was a little bit different. They had a lot more vendors and a lot more artists on site this year because they just have the space. And so it was pretty interesting to see how that kind of a change for them. And not only that, we were able to get a little bit more of the behind the scenes kind of workings in that as well. So if you guys are interested, that episode is going to come up sometime this week. So keep your eyes open for it. Other than that, that's pretty much what I've been working on. It's been the summer. It has just been so busy for people who typically watch the show. As you can see, the background is kind of, I usually have this fancy background and all the other stuff going on. I am actually working in Fort McMurray this week. And so I am stuck in a camp, and these are really paper thin walls. And I am so glad my neighbor on this side is on night shift, and this one, I don't know. He may come back at some time and have a shower. So we'll see how that goes. Other than that, I think we should be fine though. He doesn't shower till late. So other than that, that's pretty much been my week. Yeah, it's been a little bit crazy to say the least. Anyways, we're gonna take a quick little break for the folks at home who are listening to this episode, and for the people who are watching this. We're just gonna kind of roll right through this, but. Just so I have a little bit of a buffer here, so that I can pull that out later. And then we are back, and we are talking with Ian. What was your last name again?
Banky.
All right.
Yeah.
So hang on. I'm going to do that again because I can. I don't get to edit things very often. We do this show live pretty much all the time, and I don't get to edit things. So now I'm going to edit something. We are live, and we're here sitting with Ian.
Yeah,
Ian Banky.
there you go.
There we go. I don't know where Aaron came from. I just, we actually have a friend of ours. He watches the show faithfully, and he's not here tonight, and I'm kind of sad.
Well, there you go. It's on your mind, yeah.
It happens. All right. So we're going to be talking about Stray Books, and of course the book that you've been writing, or you wrote. So let's just kind of get into a little bit. What is Stray Books?
Yeah, so Stray Books is something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, pretty much as far back as I can remember. I've been writing stories and been a writer for a long time. It's what I did my education in, and I worked as a freelance writer for a number of years, as well as a lot of other jobs. And I've worked with publishers in different capacities, whether it was academic writing or in fiction writing. And I always kind of just wanted to start my own thing, just because it would be fun, it'd be a bit more open, and I could work with my friends. And I'm a big fan of music, and particularly like old punk music, and the sort of culture around the do-it-yourself attitude, where you saw so many bands like start up their own labels and stuff. Wanted to do that to the less exciting medium of books. So that was sort of the foundation of it. But that seed of an idea, yeah, it's been with me for a long time. But over the last year or so, different opportunities like sort of came up, and some things went right, and we managed to get some financing, and I brought in a couple of friends, and now we do a lot of artwork and sell books and go to conferences and talk to people like you. Yeah,
That's
it's pretty
awesome.
Great. I really can't complain. Yeah,
Living the dream.
exactly. Yeah.
So let me ask you. So when did the love of books come into your life growing up?
Well, that's something I really got to give to my mom. She's an avid reader, and she's always encouraged to me to read a lot my whole life. And much to my chagrin as a kid, we used to have this like really stuffy living room that you would only ever go in for like holidays and stuff. It had closed doors and this like certain smell to it. It was a really uncomfortable sort of stuffy room. And every night when I was little, she would make me read for an hour, and she would come and read as well. And we'd read our own books and stuff. But I did that for years and years. And then eventually it just really stuck. And I've always read, I've always written and wanted to do my own writing, but it's a lot of work to sort of develop yourself and to find that time and opportunity to get to practice a lot. But my love of books, yeah, I couldn't imagine my life without them, really. It's definitely really foundational to just what I enjoy out of being alive.
That's awesome. So let me ask you, when was the first thing, like, do you remember the first thing that you ever actually wrote?
Oh, yeah, totally. I think it must have been about 5 or 6. And I wrote it on an old like DOS computer. It was all like orange bits and stuff. And it was the Meccano Monster. And I had recently seen Terminator 2.
Yeah.
I remember my brother and sister were watching it, and I like hid behind the stairs and wasn't supposed to. But I watched Terminator 2, and then thought I had this like super original idea for this kid who was a bunch of Meccano, and the Meccano comes to life. And it was pretty much the Terminator. And there was a lot of things in Terminator 2 I didn't understand, like the smelting plant at the end of it.
Yeah.
And I just assumed towns had local lava pits. So I had it in my ending that they get rid of the Meccano Monster in the local lava pit. And
what town doesn't have a local lava pit? And if they don't, they should.
Exactly, right? I mean, it's just a natural solution when you have mechanical monsters. So.
Yeah, exactly. If there's a possibility for mechanical monsters to come alive, it just needs to happen. We need to have that in place.
Yeah, machine uprising, boom, everyone get local lava pits. Your problem solved.
Exactly. We all should just do it.
Exactly, yeah.
What could go wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So you wrote this book. Did you ever share it with anyone, or just kind of left it to yourself?
Well, I was writing it.
Yeah.
I always share my writing with a sort of handful of friends and family, and usually when I set out to write a story, I read this bit of writing advice in one of Kurt Vonnegut's books, where he really recommends that you kind of write to an individual person. So whenever I set out to write a story, I have a friend or a family member I'm kind of writing it for, and I never tell them what it's about while I'm doing it. And once the story's finished, I always get them to read it, and I sort of gauge if it's good or not by seeing their reaction. And it's like, if I can't get the person I, in my mind, wrote this for to like it, it's probably not very good. So during the process of writing Future Fables and Strange Stories, there was a lot of sort of guest readers on it, just who I wanted to share the story with. My spouse, Valerie, much to her annoyance, I'm sure at times, I would just talk like all night about these different ideas I was having and stuff like that. Or I'd be writing all day and she'd come home and be like, let me tell you about this story. And yeah, but she's a good sport. She always entertains. So yeah, there's a lot of people that sort of knew about it kind of before it came out.
That's awesome. So did when you say you write to like other people, when you were writing your book here, who were you writing that one to?
So it's made up of 13 separate short stories. So each story was for a different person. Um, some of them were there was the third story in. I definitely like wrote for my mom, kind of. It's not about mums or anything like that, but there's certain genres and themes and stuff I know she really likes, and I kind of wanted to go in that direction. A lot of my like really close friends I wrote stories for, and yeah, my partner Val as well. There was a couple in there that I kind of had in mind, or she's who I had in mind while I was writing it. It's always people very close to me though, so.
So this is something that you've just always done, is just always write to people.
It was something I kind of picked up on later in life. So when I was first writing, it was a very frustrating process because I always had lots of ideas, but I could never really get them out or sound the way I wanted to. So I really just started trying to figure out how to write better, and that required a ton of reading. And some of my favorite authors put out really good advice while they were alive, and writers always like to talk about writing, so that's a good resource. And I just really looked at the people who were my influences and saw how they approached it. And some of the techniques work for me, some of them don't. But the one from Vonnegut about choosing to write for a specific person was something that really resonated. And I really only started doing that with writing the stories in Future Fables.
That's awesome. So you were just kind of mentioning some of your influences. Who are some of those influences that you had in your life?
So in writing in general, there's like quite a few. I remember I was 16 and I read Fight Club for the first time by Chuck Palahniuk. And I just didn't know people wrote books like that. I didn't know they could use language in that way, that they could really write with such a sort of edge to it. So he was a really, really big influence in just opening my mind as to what writing could be. And then Margaret Atwood as well. I absolutely love Margaret Atwood. I read like so many of her books, and it's always really top quality. And she's really cool with how she uses grammar a lot of the time. She does some really cool things with punctuation and how she phrases sentences. And that was something I really took away from her, as well as the ability to really empathize with people across boundaries. Because I read one of her books, Oryx and Crake, when I was 18. And the protagonist in it is a male character. You kind of follow him from childhood and his teenage years and in his 20s. And that was the age I was when I read it. And I was shocked that this old lady could write such an authentic male character like that. So she really opened up my mind. Another Canadian, Douglas Copeland. And then in terms of science fiction, definitely Kurt Vonnegut and Isaac Asimov and Theodore Sturgeon are probably my personal like big three.
That's awesome. So let me ask you, what kind of like when you're developing your characters for your various books, is there a certain way that you build them out? Like do you like what kind of process do you have in behind all of the characters for your stories?
So for the short stories, it's a bit easier because it's a short story. You don't have to flesh out the characters too much. So usually then I don't know. It sounds weird, but they're just like kind of in my head, and the more I think about them, the more they kind of become fleshed out. But currently, I'm writing a full-length novel where characterization is really central to how the book is going to be structured. So I really want these characters in particular to sort of feel like real people. So my approach to that has been almost lunatic. I really, really like doing outlines. So for this book, I've actually been writing out the two main characters year by year, every major thing or minor thing that kind of happens in their lives. And all that's not going to make it into the book. Only a very small amount of it will. But the idea is, if I can really see them as real people, it should hopefully come across to the reader in the same way. So for them, yeah, that's really, yeah, every year it just kind of, this happened to them and they met this person and led to this and stuff like that.
Yeah, because we've had various authors on the show before, and it seems like every time I kind of ask this kind of question, each person has their own special way of
Mm-hmm.
that very question, right? Everyone has their way of bringing their characters to life, and so it's always interesting to see how the various people on our show, like, how do you do that? Like, how do you bring these characters to life? Because I mean, a lot of time, that's kind of your hinge, right? Like, that's, if you don't have a believable character in your story, it's everything kind of falls flat from there, right? So it's always interesting to see that kind of view from the various people that we have on the show.
Yeah, like everyone is so different about it, and that's like one of the big things with the arts that makes it so unique and special is that there is never really a set way to do something, and everyone sort of attacks it from their own sort of place in life, their own views and stuff like that. And no process is really superior or inferior to another one. Everyone's like so different. Some people can just sit in front of a computer and hammer out a story, but I write super long outlines that are almost like equations and take a really super structured approach to it. So when I'm sitting in front of the computer, there is no questions. I know exactly what I'm writing. But that doesn't work for some people, right? And yeah, it's a really cool thing about the arts in general.
That's awesome. So let me ask you, you guys have started Stray Books. Tell me just a little bit more about Stray Books. Like, 'cause I'm kind of curious, what kind of, like, what was the impetus to like start this? Like, what, like,
so the timing,
who's crazy enough to do this?
yeah, we definitely get that a lot, right? It's like we live in the digital age and we're selling paper products. We sell digital stuff too, but our focus is definitely in print. Yeah, definitely that's a pretty common reaction. I don't really blame people for it. It's a few things, like some of it's personal stuff, just really kind of working out really well. And other stuff, I think that this is a good time to start a different type of publisher, because everyone sort of thinks that computers and stuff are going to super destroy printed material, but you just look at general sales numbers, they're not. There still is a market for it. It's a bit different, but there still is a market. And then you hear the stories of the really, really big publishers not being able to stay relevant and kind of going under. But what I see is we have all this beautiful technology around us all the time. And you can use that technology to make producing physical products a whole hell of a lot easier, right? Like from digital art tools to typesetting tools to advances in printing, you can bring a book to market with way less cost than you used to. And the big publishers, what they're facing is that they have a lot of overhead, they have a lot of moving parts, and a lot of expectations on them. But so if you downscale the whole model, it becomes more feasible. And that's what we're hoping to do here. So it is by instead of being scared of technology, we're really embracing it and just trying to use it to create a really classic product that people still love. So
That's awesome, because there's nothing better than having something physical in your hand, right?
yeah.
Like, I love a good book, but I love the book, right? Like, I love having that. I've had Kindles, I've had all those, and nothing can replace the actual feeling of having a good book in your hand, right?
Yeah, it is something like at one point I definitely tried out like the ebooks, but I found I just wasn't retaining or kind of connecting with it in the same way. And that physical weight or seeing how people choose to do typesetting and the interior design of a book to cover art, and it's a whole experience, right? It's so much more than just the words on the page. And in the digital world, that's like totally lost. And definitely ebooks came in and made a big impact, but now they're kind of, the tide's like pulling back in, because I think people have realized that digital is great and amazing, but it doesn't need to replace everything that came before it. And a lot of things are easier on like a phone, like newspapers, right? Like you don't need a printed newspaper every day because you can get articles on your phone. If you want to sit down and really connect with a good book, just the physical copy is totally the way to do it.
That's awesome. So let me just let's go into a little bit about your book itself. You said it's a bunch of short stories. What kind of short stories are we looking at?
Yeah, so they're all science fiction. Some of them genre bend a bit, but it really is a sort of throwback to the golden age of sci-fi pulp from the 1950s. So in the stories, they all kind of explore different sort of scientific sort of advances and how they interact with culture and the individual. AI is something that obviously comes up a lot in it, as it's very topical. And it kind of kicked off just because, like I mentioned earlier, I was just really into reading old pulp sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
And the golden age of it had such a weird setup to how authors were writing. So there was a lot of magazines that sold sci-fi stories, and they were really popular. So it created a ton of opportunities for writers. And for a period of time there, pretty much anyone with a typewriter and an idea could sell a story. It was a way to make a living that wasn't sort of pipe dream. And there was just this crazy influx of stories that were really wild. Like they were written under like tight deadlines. They were tackling really crazy themes because it was the post-war years and the atom bomb and space exploration, and all of this was on the public consciousness. And the sci-fi was just so cool. And looking at our time in history, we're living in this insane technological boom. And science fiction works as such a good sort of place in our culture to talk about this technology before it's at our front door. And so I really just wanted to emulate what those writers were doing in the 50s. So originally I had written it under kind of different pen names that were kind of different personas for the stories. And I gave myself really insane deadlines. I was writing like a story a week, and I wanted to really try to capture that environment and that frantic nature that the writers in the 50s were doing. And I hope I did that. And that's how the stories were kind of birthed. So is the work ethic from the past with the topics of today, because I think more than ever, we kind of need science fiction.
That's awesome. So let me just quickly divert here for a second and ask you, like, what was science fiction? Like, why do the whole book in science fiction? Like, what was that? What was that impetus?
Yeah, again, it was just kind of, I really like keeping up to date on like science and technology. I'm certainly not a scientist. I don't have a science degree. My partner is in the sciences, so her and I talk about just sort of advances a lot. We watch a lot of stuff on YouTube, and just seeing what's kind of coming down the line, it was just so mind-blowing. My mind just started spinning with possibilities of it. And then some of it was reactionary to some of the stuff that is just really commonplace. So the idea of the evil robot, I just think is done. It's done to death, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I don't understand why something that was smarter than us would sort of have that impulse. So I was like, why couldn't an AI be a lot more benign or like beneficial to humanity and, want to help us out? So that's the theme, and a reoccurring character throughout the short stories that I sort of wrote about was an AI that is very different and very esoteric in a way. So that was something I wanted to explore. Other stories in there kind of were just about different topics I like found interesting. So stuff with like GMOs and how that could affect people. And once we start genetically sort of engineering people, how would that enter the market? And you see a lot of stuff that's really fueled by dystopia, so evil regimes and this and that. But I find real life is a lot more gray than that. So in my story about like genetically modifying babies, it's presented way more of a sort of sales and aesthetic thing. So this couple goes and visits a doctor, and he's like a salesman. He's just trying to sell them on a package. And this family realizes that they can't afford all of these like bells and whistles because this is a very expensive thing. So the doctor offers them another alternative, which is to genetically make their child perpetually happy. So their life is going to be nothing but failure and like mediocrity, but they can make it happy. And so this couple has to sort of wrestle with that choice. So I really wanted to pull away from the sort of Hollywood, like black and white dichotomy that we always see, and sort of envision a more moral gray zone about how these things would appear.
That's awesome. All right. Is there anything else that you'd like to touch on about your book and Stray Books?
Yeah, for sure. So we are going to be at the Edmonton Comic Con. You can check us out there.
Edmonton Expo?
Sorry. Yeah, the Edmonton Expo. Sorry, I got my terminology wrong. And we have, like I was mentioning earlier, we have a magazine coming out in September. It's called Pulp Kings. It's for Halloween, but we want to make sure that we have it for the expo in Edmonton. And we've got some horror stories in there, horror and sci-fi stories. One of them is by myself. We also have Randy Schroeder on there and Colin Lavery, as well as a lot of like really cool art in there. And we also have coming out in the next couple of months a sort of podcast of future fables and strange stories, where it's a narration of the stories, it's some cool background music and stuff. And yeah, we'll be doing lots of readings around Alberta, lots of signings, and it won't be hard to find us for sure.
That's awesome. So where can people find you now?
Yeah, on social media, you can check us out on Instagram at Stray Books Ltd, all one word. Or better yet, if you feel inclined to read a couple of the stories or to pick up a copy of Future Fables, you can check out our website, which is straybooks.ca. And we're also in a bunch of bookstores in and around Calgary, and we should be in Edmonton in not too long, actually. So
awesome. All right. So just quickly, I want to say thank you for joining us today. We're going to take a quick little break here. And we will come back with some of the events that are happening in and around the city. All right, we're not doing the events. We're going to skip that. Cool. And then we're just going to go into the ending. So pretty much, I want to thank you once again for joining us today. It's been absolutely fantastic having you guys on. And I'm excited because you guys are going to be up in Edmonton. I'm sure we're going to see each other at the expo because I'll be kicking around there for sure. Mm-hmm. And so I'm gonna come check you guys out. Everyone else should come check you guys out as well. And where can people find you once again on the web, wherever?
Yeah, you can check us out on Instagram at Stray Books Ltd, all one word, and at our website where you can pick up a copy of Future Fables or just read some of the stories for free, which is straybooks.ca. And awesome. Thank you very much for having me on the show. It's been a great time.
Awesome. All right, so that is it. That is all. I'm going to just say thank you to everyone out there for watching and or listening to this edition of the Nerdcast. Once again, the Northern Nerdcast is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network powered by ATB. Please head on over to albertapodcastnetwork.com for a list of amazing Alberta-made podcasts. And if you guys would like to know more information about the Northern Nerd Network, you guys can check us out on Twitter at Northern_Nerd or on Facebook at facebook.com/Northern Nerd or on our YouTube page at youtube.com/Northern Nerd Network. We even have our very own website where we host our podcasts. We put all our videos up. We even do some event notifications on there as well. So if you want to check out some of the stuff that's happening in the city, we sometimes put up events in there as well. That is it. That is all. I want to thank everyone else out there for watching and or listening to this edition of the Nerdcast. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you.